Hi everyone, welcome to the Whiteleyverse with me, Connor Whiteley, for another daily short story. Now, before I start today's story, please remember to like, comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content, and the engagement really helps the Whiteleyverse with the YouTube algorithm. Also, if you want to buy this short story and any of my other fiction, then they're available from all major ebook retailers and at your local bookstore and local library if you requested, and you can order paperback copies from Amazon. Now, here's today's short story. I hope you enjoyed just as much as I did writing it.
Love in the student interview. University student Elliot Pitcher flat out loved being a student reporter for the university's newspaper. It was perfect experience for him if he ever wanted to be a real journalist, reporter, or news presenter after his journalism degree. And right now, he couldn't afford to fail in the interview that could define his student career and hopefully help him get a foothold into the real world of journalism. Elliot sat on a wonderfully warm black chair made from wood in his best friend Holly's favorite cafe at the university. Elliot hadn't been here before, but it was great with its bright purple walls that were a lot more tasteful and stylish than they sounded. The light hardwood floor added depth and age to the relatively new cafe. And Elliot wasn't going to lie, but he had to admit the cafe knew how to hire cute boys to work behind the semicircular counter. Elliot also really liked the wonderful sounds of coffee machines buzzing and hissing, and other students ordering their drinks. Granted, Elliot really didn't like the sound of the matcha green tea cake that someone was ordering, but each to their own. Even the idea of having disgusting matcha in a cake made the awful taste of its bitter, sharp bite form on his tongue. Elliot was never going to have matcha ever again. Elliot wrapped his hands around the lukewarm mug of creamy hot chocolate that Holly had ordered him, and she was sitting next to him, watching something behind him. Elliot had really learnt long ago not to bother with what Holly was looking at. It could have been a bird, a cute boy, or nothing for all he knew, and Holly could have been simply lost in thought. But Elliot loved her anyway. Elliot had his laptop open on his emails because he was waiting for the hotshot new captain of the university's football team, Luca Pack, to reply to his request for an interview. Elliot just knew he was going to get it thanks to Holly and Elliot's other friend, Jimmy, basically making the hot new captain do it. The only thing Elliot didn't know was when the captain wanted to meet. "Has he emailed yet?" Holly asked. Elliot weakly smiled at his best friend. She was beautiful with her long brown hair perfectly straightened, glossy, and Elliot was honestly surprised she was single, but apparently no one had asked. Elliot just knew that was rubbish because Holly was too perfect not to have a guy wanting her. Hell, if Elliot was straight or at least bi, then Elliot would have asked her out. So what had probably happened was different men had asked Holly out, but she had turned them down. And there was nothing wrong with that. "He said he would contact you immediately," Holly said, picking up her own large mug of hot chocolate that was the size of a small plant pot. Her entire face seemed to disappear as she drank from it. Elliot wanted to say that the captain was probably busy, but in reality, there was a small chance that Holly was only slightly exaggerating. Elliot had noticed she had done a few times about him, so Luca might have said he would do it in a little while, or something. Elliot just wanted him to hurry though. From what Elliot had managed to find out about Luca Pack from various social media and small news outlets, was that he had grown up in southeast England, and he lived very close to the university. He had been the first openly gay student to play on the university football team, much less become captain of it, and he was rather attractive. Elliot had never met the man, and Luca seemed to be allergic to photographs, but Elliot had found 2 photos of him, one on the university website and another one on social media, and he looked cute. Very cute. "Remind me," Holly said in between taking quiet gulps of hot chocolate, "why this is so important to you. You know, besides him being sexy." Elliot just smiled. He wished she would stop saying that and highlighting the fact that Luca was sexy. She had been almost taunting him all morning with that fact. It's important because Luca doesn't give interviews, allow photos to be taken, nor does he allow anything to be mentioned about his sexuality, Elliot said. This is a big deal because Luca has even turned down national newspapers and international sporting scouts. Holly slowly nodded, but clearly still wasn't getting it. If I can get an interview with him and show up all these national media outlets, then that could give me clout in the future, Elliot said. Of course, Elliot had no idea how it would work in the real world, but his journalism lecturers had all agreed that this would be a good interview to put on his CV, and that was what sold Elliot on pursuing the interview. His laptop pinged. Holly grabbed his laptop before he could even open the email. "Wow," Holly said. "He wants to meet you in 10 minutes in here." Elliot snatched the laptop back and was amazed that Holly was telling the truth. Elliot quickly replied and confirmed the interview, and his stomach filled with butterflies. He was finally going to get a chance at his big break. Luca Pack couldn't believe he was actually doing this. He loved students, being helpful, and he really admired ambition, but he couldn't help but feel like this was a little too far even for him. Luca normally flat out went out of his way not to give interviews to anyone, even the major sporting magazines, national newspapers, and talent scouts that could easily make his career and give him a job straight out of university. Luca hadn't even really meant to accept Elliot's invitation for an interview, but Elliot's two best friends were very persuasive, demanding, and really good friends, and Luca respected that a lot. Luca went down a very long brown university corridor with little and large seminar rooms jetting out from it, tasteless brown walls covered in posters, and Luca's favorite features were the bright LED lights that shone and sparkled like radiant diamonds overhead. He really enjoyed walking down these corridors when it was pitch black outside, and it was almost magical in a way. There weren't even that many other students walking about. Most of the others were probably in lectures or something, but Luca did see a few students look, smile, and wink at him. Both male and female students did. Luca focused for a few moments on a particular man that didn't look at him in the slightest, so he was probably straight, and he was cute with his smooth brown hair, angular jaw, and fit body. But he didn't even look like he had noticed Luca was there. Not a lot of boys did. And even though Luca had been out of the closet for close to 3 years now, he just didn't feel like he was a part of anything. He didn't seem to fit in mainstream gay culture because he didn't care in the slightest about rainbows, feminine things, or whatever rubbish other people were into. But if other gay people liked that stuff, then Luca would only support them like he had done with his friends over the years. Luca had trouble fitting in at the university's LGBT+ events because all Luca wanted to talk about was sports, his sports science degree, and other university-related topics, but no one at those events seemed interested or knew the first thing about sports. Luca just didn't feel like he fit in anywhere. And in all honesty, that was probably why he refused to give interviews, because Luca knew full well how important and big of a deal this was, that he was the first openly gay football player on a national university team, and Luca didn't want to face questions about being gay. Because he was more than that. That was something that seriously annoyed him about mainstream media. Whenever they met a gay person who played sports, had friends, and did charity work on the weekends, like Luca did, they were only interested in him being gay. And Luca only ever wanted to give positive interviews about being gay. He didn't want to talk about how he didn't feel like he fit in anywhere, that he could actually meet a hot guy. He didn't want to talk about his parents almost hating him for being gay because they believed it would destroy his footballing career. And Luca just wanted to give an inspirational interview. The type of interview he would have loved to read as a young gay boy, when he was struggling with accepting himself, wanting to play sports, and worried about what his family would think. Luca came to the end of the Brown University corridor, and hooked a left into the cafe where he was meant to be meeting the interviewer, Elliot. Luca had never been to this cafe before. He had just picked it randomly, but it looked good with its purple walls, black walls, and cute staff behind the semicircular counter. Luca was about to go over and order himself a cup of coffee to help him get through the interview when something caught his eye. In the far corner of the little cafe were two people, a man and a woman, talking quietly with notepads, a laptop, and two very large mugs of drink next to them. And in Luca's experience, that only meant one thing: they were journalist students. Luca went over to them, and then he really focused on the boy, and Luca just stopped in his tracks. His heart pounded in his heart. His stomach tightened into a knot. Sweat started to pour off him. This boy was perfect. Sure, he had seen some amazing-looking boys in the changing rooms with well-toned bodies, wonderful angular faces, and just amazing looks all around, but those sporty jocks seriously didn't have anything compared to this Elliot boy. Luca just stared wide-eyed at the utterly stunning fit boy sitting at the black table talking to his friends. Luca seriously loved how fit and skinny he was, with his face a perfect artful blend of angles and lines, and Luca was fairly sure if the boy put on the smallest amount of makeup, that would bring out the slightly feminine features of his face. Elliot also had the best curly black hair Luca had ever seen, and Luca had to admit the boy was stylish too. Luca really loved Elliot's black and white jumper, gray Chelsea boots, and wonderfully thin-skinned tight black jeans that seriously highlighted how fit Elliot was. Elliot was sheer perfection. This was going to be a lot of fun. "Oh, he's here," Holly said. Elliot felt so excited as he slowly turned around to look at what Luca actually looked like in person. It took Elliot a few moments of scanning the cafe, packed with students, lecturers, and others catching up, before he noticed the beautiful, sexy football player standing halfway across the cafe. Elliot felt all his stress, nervousness, and tension in his neck and shoulders disappear at the wonderful sight of Luca. Sure, Elliot had seen Luca before in those two pictures, but they seriously didn't do him justice in the slightest. Elliot really loved Luca's broad, muscular shoulders that looked to be barely contained in the white t-shirt he was wearing, that also highlighted how toned and muscular Luca was with his washboard abs. Luca's stunning face was delightful with its bright brown eyes, strong sexy jawline, and beautiful short blonde hair. Luca was sheer perfection, and Elliot had no idea why every single man in the university wasn't chasing after this Adonis amongst them. Elliot waved Luca to come over to them, and he instantly felt so silly for doing it in such a public place. He wanted to be professional, calm, and collective for this interview. Hell, he needed it for his career, but he just knew that this was going to be very hard. When Luca came over to them, all Elliot could do was stare at the beautiful man that was taking a seat next to Holly, and Luca just looked at him. Elliot liked looking into stunning Luca's eyes. They were warm, calming, and very stunning like the rest of him. "Hi," Luca said, barely managing to get the word out. Elliot tried to speak himself, but his throat was so dry that only a strange sound came out. Holly laughed, and Elliot took a mouthful of his hot chocolate. "Right, I'm going to leave you two to get on. I'll be back in about an hour," Holly said, waving the two men goodbye. Elliot wasn't sure if he was happier or not that Holly wasn't there. It was great to have alone time with such a beautiful man, but Elliot was so nervous. "How do you want to do this?" Elliot asked. Luca sat perfectly straight, like he was shocked at the question. "You mean, like I get to have an input into this interview? You mean I can suggest the way this interview goes?" At that moment, it was very hard for Elliot not to widen his eyes and mockingly nod at Luca like that was the strangest question he had ever heard. Of course, he got to suggest it. In journalism and interviews, the reporter and interviewee needed to work together and both get something out of this. Then Elliot realized that Luca was used to real-world reporters hounding him, and of course, in the real world, reporters didn't always follow the best practices they were taught at university. "Yes," Elliot said, picking up his notebook and pen. "Are there any topics off limits, and what do you want to get out of this interview?" And this was exactly where the balance needed to be struck, because Elliot really wanted to give Luca the interview he wanted, but he also needed to get good information that would help him create a great report that everyone wanted to read. Luca smiled, and Elliot's heart skipped a few beats. "Okay, thank you." I don't want the interview to focus on my sexuality or my so-called groundbreaking appointment as captain, and I don't really want a photograph attached." Elliot slowly nodded. It was a good thing Luca was so hot and captivating, because Elliot wasn't sure how he was going to truly respect Luca's wishes for two reasons. As a reporter, Elliot knew that everyone in the university, local area, and hell, nationally, wanted to know more about the openly gay football player, so if he wrote about that, then he was guaranteed to have a sensational interview. Everyone was dying to read the information. Also, as a gay man himself, Elliot wanted to know about Luca. Elliot had grown up in a supportive town with wonderful family members, friends, and other people at school, but it was still drilled into him that he couldn't possibly do manly things for a job. It had been hard enough to get his family to support him doing journalism, because it was mainly a male-dominated industry, and Elliot's family wasn't sure he belonged there. So Elliot just wanted to know that things could be different. "Can I ask why you don't want to do those two things? You're a great-looking guy, so I imagine you would like having your photo taken," Elliot said. And Elliot almost turned around to the windows in the cafe, in case he could see his professionalism flying away in the distance. Luca thankfully seemed to laugh and groan at the same time. "I would just prefer not to talk about it. I am more than a gay person, and I am not some model to lord my physical appearance over others, and my parents would." Elliot just looked at the beautiful man in front of him, and that's when he slowly started to realize that Luca wasn't sure himself about anything. As a reporter, it was his job to make sure the interviewee felt comfortable, relaxed, and wanted to do this interview completely. But as a gay man, Elliot also knew Luca was conflicted because of the expectations of others. Elliot had been there too many times over the years. "What would you like to talk about then?" Elliot asked, hoping to relax Luca a little more first before he circled back to the sexuality question. Luca shrugged, and he gently smiled at Elliot. "I know you're trying to be kind, and you're the first journalist that's even tried to respect me, but I don't know what I want to talk about." Elliot could feel that Luca wanted to leave, but he had to save this interview, not only for his future career, but because he wanted to spend a little longer with this beautiful man. Elliot put his pen and notebook down on the table. "Just tell me something, please, gay to gay. Why don't you want people to know more about you being gay? It's fine. It's inspirational. When I was growing up, I would have loved to know I could do manly things in the real world." Luca's eyes widened a little. He smiled and leant a little closer. He actually leant over close to Elliot, that he could smell his wonderful aftershave, cedarwood, and another earthy note he couldn't identify. "I'm just more than my sexuality, and that is what I want to talk about, and my parents wouldn't." Elliot smiled. "What is it about your parents and family? Do they not support you? Admire you? Or realize how amazing your achievements are?" Luca leant backwards and shook his head. "This was a mistake. I'm sorry for wasting your time. You deserve better." Elliot watched Luca get up quickly and rush past him. Elliot grabbed Luca's wonderfully smooth wrist, and he was surprised at how warm, soft, and right it felt to touch Luca. And Elliot was surprised Luca didn't seem to flinch. He also seemed to be enjoying it. "You haven't wasted my time. I got to meet you, and no one deserves better than you. Everyone is perfect in their own way," Elliot said. Luca looked like he wanted to say something as he leant closer to Elliot, but then he shook his head, shook his wrist free, and literally ran away. Something Elliot was concerned he had been doing his entire life. "Where's Luca?" Holly asked. Elliot flat out couldn't believe what had just happened, because he was only now realizing that he had been staring at his laptop for the past 10 minutes, trying to understand everything had that happened. Elliot went to reach for his large mug of hot chocolate, but it was empty, and Elliot also realized that Holly was back a lot earlier than she had said she would be, and Holly never ever did that sort of thing. There weren't quite as many students, lecturers, and other people in the cafe now, which Elliot was rather glad about because he felt so deflated, concerned, and worried that he actually just wanted to be alone. But he also needed Holly, more as a soundboard than anything else. So Elliot told Holly what happened, and she clicked her fingers to get the attention of one of the hot men behind the counter, ordered herself the largest vegan chai latte they had, and she sat down opposite Elliot. She was looking at him so intensely that Elliot felt like she was burrowing into his soul. "What you thinking then?" Holly asked. Elliot hated and loved it when she turned everything back on him. "I think his parents, family, and hell, probably everyone in his life was homophobic to him. He probably feels like a failure and like he doesn't fit in anywhere." "You know," Holly said, slowly nodding, "when we went to that LGBT plus party the other week, I was hardly getting sporty vibes from the place." Elliot completely agreed. Luca probably didn't feel like he fitted in anywhere. Not at home or with his family, and certainly not with the stereotypical gay community here at the university. Hell, Elliot barely felt like he fitted in sometimes. "I couldn't imagine what that feels like," Holly said. "It isn't nice," Elliot said. "You feel like you are just useless, not wanted, and like the world is better off without you." Holly gasped. "Sorry. I forget you went through a rough patch." Elliot smiled. Calling it a rough patch was an understatement, but Elliot loved Holly too much to care. He mentioned something about charity work and wanting to prove to the world he's more than his sexuality, Elliot said. "Makes sense. Isn't everyone more than their sexuality?" Elliot was about to nod when a hot blonde boy came over with Holly's chai latte, and she seductively smiled at him, and the hot boy blushed, but even that boy's smile wasn't as perfect as Luca's. Damn it. Elliot was seriously into Luca, and all he wanted to do was help make Luca feel wanted, respected, and maybe even cared about, because Elliot was starting to realize he really did care about Luca. "But I thought," Holly said, "he said that because he came from a homophobic family. Does he actually want the interview to be about proving he's more than his sexuality, or pleasing his parents that don't want anyone to know he's gay?" Elliot rolled his eyes. He hated that wonderful Holly always made good points. It was probably why she always did the best in her essays, exams, and other coursework assignments. She was a master at arguing, and Elliot just knew she was going to make a hell of a journalist in the future. But Elliot didn't really want to think about that right now. Not when the interview that could really help him after university was clearly going to fail. Holly took out her phone and dialed a number. "What you doing?" Elliot asked. "Calling my friend Stacy. She runs the volunteering society. If Luca does charity work with the university, she'll know," Holly said. "That would be amazing information to have." "Hi Stacy," Holly said. "I'm good, thanks. Do you know Luca Pack? Does he do volunteering with you?" Elliot just watched Holly and moved to the edge of his seat to make sure he didn't miss a single detail. Not that he could hear what Stacy was saying on the phone. "Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. And yes, I will come to your party on Friday." "Bye," Holly said. Elliot leant closer to her. "Luca volunteers every single Saturday with that children's home at the bottom of the hill for foster children, and every Sunday he volunteers at the counseling chambers in the city center." Elliot's eyes widened. That was some serious charity work, because Elliot had had a foster brother and sister for a time, and they were amazing people. But Elliot also knew how much stigma and hate and negativity they received because they were fostered. Elliot had wanted to foster some kids in the future to give them the respect, care, and love that some foster children sadly didn't get, but the fact that Luca was actively helping them now was even more amazing. And that really made Luca even more attractive. "What's the counseling chambers?" Elliot asked. "It sounds familiar, but I can't place it." Holly waved a finger as she was taking a hearty mouthful of her chai latte, then she placed the mug down. It's a small charity in the city center that offers free counseling to people who can't afford it and don't meet the requirements for the NHS. It mainly focuses on LGBT+, young and homeless people. Elliot just smiled. That actually was great news because it showed that Luca really wanted to connect with other gay people and help them. And it also showed that Luca was a good enough person to want to avoid going home when he could be doing charity work instead. I know that look, Holly said, smiling. You have your story. Elliot looked at her and slowly nodded. He actually did have his story, and he really hoped that it would honor Luca, teach his homophobic parents a lesson, and help Luca to know just how amazing he actually was. But time was of the essence. When Luca got back to his cold, lonely flat, that was rather great normally, but Luca really did feel sad, energized, or even like he could enjoy anything at the moment, as he threw himself onto his soft single bed that was cold as always with its thin blue bedsheets. As Luca laid on his bed, partly enjoying the sweet scents of vanilla that came from them, he couldn't believe what he had just done, and how pathetic and stupid and silly he had been. There was absolutely no reason why he felt angry for those few precious seconds with beautiful Elliot. All Elliot had tried to do was help himself, tell Luca the truth about him being perfect the way he was, and Elliot was only slightly disapproving of how his parents and family had made him feel over the years. Elliot was of course right about all of it, and that's exactly what had annoyed Luca so much. He wasn't used to people giving a damn about him, feeling anything for him, and actually wanting to see if he was okay. Normally everyone was only interested in their star football captain, the firstly openly gay boy, to hold such a position, and whatever nonsense Luca had to endure so the university and football society could tick their bloody diversity boxes. All Luca actually wanted was for someone to tell him he was okay in the head. He was fine to be gay, and at a real push, Luca would have loved someone to tell him he was beautiful. Luca didn't want anyone to tell him though. He was used to all the girls at the university telling him how hot he was, but Luca didn't want to be hot or seen as some hot model to fantasize over. He wanted someone to find him beautiful for who he was, not his body. Luca just realized that he had blown it with Elliot. He barely had any information to write his interview or article with. Luca had failed that cute, sweet boy that was only trying to help Luca and help his own future career, and Luca couldn't even be bothered to help him do that. He was such a rubbish person. Luca's laptop pinged. Luca rolled his eyes because he always kept his laptop open on his desk that was a few meters from his bed, and he really didn't want to answer any university emails at the moment. It pinged again. Luca seriously didn't need this, but he forced himself to go over to his laptop, and he was just a little confused that Elliot had emailed him with a link to an article. Luca's stomach twisted into a painful knot. His shoulders and body tensed. This couldn't be happening. He really hoped Elliot hadn't written an attacking, awful article about Luca's behavior. That seriously wouldn't be good. But Luca forced himself to take a few deep calming breaths, and he clicked on the article link. Luca was rather surprised when he saw the title of the article by Elliot. It was titled "Why Gays Are More Than Sexuality, and Gay Footballers Are Amazing." Luca felt his entire body relax a little bit more as he read the article, and he was amazed at how Elliot had found out some of the information. There was a lot of information about all the charity Luca did on the weekends and how it impacted so many lives. There was plenty of content about Luca's homophobic upbringing, even though this section never mentioned Luca's name specifically, and it really painted Luca in a very in-depth and positive light. But Luca just focused on the very last paragraph. It was a sort of section praising and thanking Luca for agreeing to the interview, but also making Elliot more aware of problems that Luca had faced. But Luca just knew that the real point of the paragraph was to really hammer home exactly how great he was. Luca had never had someone do this for him before. He had never had someone write things this nice about him, praising him for his charity, telling him that his parents and family were in the wrong and not him, and no one had ever called him amazing before. Luca's stomach filled with butterflies, and Luca realized that Elliot really was amazing. Elliot could have written a harsher, truer article about how damaged, messed up, and useless Luca was, and the real reason why he refused to give interviews, but he didn't. Elliot respected Luca, and cared enough about him that he had gone the extra mile. And all Luca could think about was if Elliot, the beautiful boy that he was willing to do that for Luca when they weren't even dating, talking, or friends at the very least. What sort of amazing boyfriend could he be in the future? That was a question Luca really wanted to answer. And Luca seriously respected him for that. And then Luca checked the second email, and it was Elliot asking if he liked it. Luca wanted to write, scream, and text, yes, and tell beautiful Elliot exactly what this amazing article meant to him, but he almost didn't want to. In fact, Luca just realized that he really liked Elliot. He wasn't only a cute, beautiful boy, but he was also kind, compassionate, and really, really caring. Exactly the sort of guy that Luca wanted to be with and ask out on a date. Luca got up, grabbed his keys, and went straight out of his apartment because that was exactly what he was going to do. He had a very beautiful boy to ask out, and that seriously excited him a lot more than he ever wanted to admit. Elliot sat at a long row of fake wooden desks along a long, dull white wall in the university library, with hundreds of rows of books behind him, giving the air a slight musty tang that made the taste of mustard form on his tongue, but Elliot didn't mind. He was far too happy at the moment. He had sent off his article to his editor that had basically auto-published it, and he had sent a link to Luca. The sheer silence of the library around him was a little off-putting because there were no other students in here with him, but Elliot just hoped that Luca liked it. When Elliot had sat down to write it, he had had no clue whatsoever what to write except from the charity work, but he just wrote and managed to pull it off. All Elliot had really wanted to do was honor the pain, trauma, and upset of Luca's past and present, as he presumably still lived with his parents during the university holidays. But Elliot also seriously wanted to tell Luca how amazing he was and that it was his parents that were in the wrong about his sexuality. His editor liked the article. Other students loved it, judging by the comments, and hell, Elliot had also received a few emails from national journalists. Elliot had a sneaking suspicion that his editor had emailed them about the article's publication, but Elliot still hadn't heard from the most important person. The sweet scents of vanilla, hot chocolate, and wonderful cinnamon filled the air, and Elliot just knew that Holly was coming over because her strange perfume was what she always wore before a date, and it was weird that she was stopping off here before she went off. Elliot turned around to see Holly walking away in her little black dress, but a very cute, sexy man was standing there waiting for him. Luca looked flat out amazing, just in his white t-shirt from earlier that highlighted how fit, muscular, and toned he was. He really was stunning, and all Elliot wanted to do in that moment was simply run his fingers through Luca's blonde hair. Elliot stared at Luca for a moment, completely unsure of what he was going to say about the article. What if he was going to shout? Order him to delete it? What? Luca rushed over to Elliot. Elliot tensed. But Luca just hugged him and kissed him on the cheek. Elliot really loved the feeling of passion, care, and attraction that flooded his body at the touch, and Luca was seriously hugging him. And Elliot sort of got the feeling that this was the first time ever that Luca had truly hugged another man. But it felt so right, natural, and wonderful. "Thank you," Luca said, still hugging Elliot tight. "I didn't mean to walk out on you earlier. I was angry at my life, my family, and others. All." Elliot placed a finger over Luca's beautifully soft lips. "I know. All you wanted was for someone to tell you that you were right, wonderful, and beautiful. I've been there, lots of people have been, and you are really, really are beautiful." Elliot coughed a little as Luca hugged him even tighter, and Elliot couldn't breathe. "And you are amazing, by the way," Elliot said, and gave Luca a little schoolboy smile. I would love to hear about it more on a date. Luca pulled away a little, frowned, and then smiled. My first date. Yeah, I would love that. Elliot gave Luca a quick, amazing kiss on the cheek. Their fingers interlinked, and they slowly walked out of the library. And sure, this was just a first date, but Elliot knew it would go well because he really felt so connected to the beautiful man he was walking next to him. And Elliot really hoped that this date would turn into another, then hopefully, that would lead to a lot more wonderful things down the road. And that was something Elliot was seriously looking forward to.
Welcome back everyone, it's me again, Connor Whiteley. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's story, because I flat out love writing, creating stories and sharing them with you. If you really enjoyed today's story, then please remember to like, comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content, and the engagement really helps the Whiteleyverse with the YouTube algorithms. And if you want to buy this short story or any of my other fiction, then they're available from all major ebook retailers, and you can get them from your local library if you requested, and you can order the paperback copies from Amazon, your local bookstore or local library if you request it. Lastly, if you want to support the channel on a one-off basis, then you can now buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. Also, if you know anyone who would enjoy today's story, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the channel. So, thanks for watching the Whiteleyverse, and I'll see you again soon. Have a great day, everyone.